What's up, YouTube? Let's talk about structure. So I kind of want to break this video up into three different parts. I first want to look at creating a theme for the track, and then taking that concept or that theme and turning it more into a catchy kind of hook or something that's more memorable. And then I want to look at structuring the entire arrangement in a more thoughtful manner. So I've got an example here that I've been working on throughout a couple of streams. The track did originally start as like a track from scratch using only Serum, but I started experimenting with some other stuff, and it deviated quite a lot from that only Serum thing. So there's some other VSTs and stuff here, but if you are wanting to follow, how the track was created from scratch, you can follow along on those streams. Anyway, this is the track that we've got so far. So what I want to go through in this video is a couple of ideas for how to develop a theme or develop something that you're working on into a little bit more of a cohesive structure. In my workflow, that generally involves a couple of steps. So the first thing is to either develop or identify the theme of the track. That's a couple of the sounds that you think are the strongest sort of sounds in the track. After going over this track, many times and, creating different parts and stuff, you'll notice that it is getting pretty messy. So one thing that, I generally say is just keep creating and keep throwing in sounds as much as you can. And then the kind of development of the theme is more about removing which sounds don't fit, if that makes sense. So I think a lot of my kind of fine tuning and my kind of, polishing of the track, it involves a lot more removing of stuff than it involves adding stuff. And there's a couple of ways of going around doing this without being too destructive. So one of the key elements to this is I usually keep a folder that I call trash, and I'll just put everything that's not currently in use in the current sort of arrangement. I mean, here there's even a track that's muted. I can put this into trash so long. And that's another thing, is I'll always have another MIDI track here in the trash folder that I kind of load all the MIDIs onto, so I can always remove you'll notice here, check MIDI. And this will have all the sort of MIDIs and stuff that I've used with all the different plugins and stuff. So I can remove a plugin, add another plugin, drag that MIDI on, etc. And I can kind of keep developing the MIDI and try it out with all sorts of different sounds. And I find, it's a lot more of a quick workflow being able to kind of concrete these sounds in and move on. And at the end, you're just choosing whether the sound fits or not. You're not fine tuning it and going over and over the sounds hundreds of times over and over again, if that makes sense. One of the ways of doing this, like I said, is keeping a trash folder. But then another one is using multiple iterations of the project. So for example, you'll see here I've got track from scratch 1, arrange 3. So what I'm actually going to do here with you guys is let's actually just save this. Go file, save as, and let's just call this arrange 4, and we're going to create another iteration of this. Now, anything that we do to this project is non-destructive. We can always jump back to that previous save that we made. So I guess the idea here is, what I'm trying to say in the first part, developing the theme or identifying the theme of the track is, don't be afraid to remove stuff and destroy stuff. And like I said, one way of being able to do that is keeping a trash folder and saving multiple iterations of the project as you go. Because then, for example, I can arrange things differently, render this out as a WAV file, and then I can compare the wave that I rendered from the previous version and this one and see, how did it develop, what's better, and I can always use ideas from both in the next one. So there's actually a saying, I think, about this, and it's don't be afraid to kill your baby. It's a bit grim, but it's one of those things where, often we'll spend so much time creating these sounds that it kind of feels painful to remove something. For example, here, if we just, there's a couple of sounds here that might be cool. I just muted them in that kind of instance. But if we remove this track, it might be a little bit painful because we might want to go back to that sound. We might want to use it again. So I guess it's a subconscious thing, moving it into a trash folder. It's always there for us to pull back in again if we need. So that's a powerful thing. So, okay, on to identifying a good theme. So generally speaking, I'd say there's kind of 3 attributes that are kind of the easiest to identify. Hey, it's me from the future. So I figured I would just want to jump in here and say, I do probably say this quite often on my channel, but there aren't really any golden rules to music. So most of the stuff in this video is just going to be kind of like my observations while creating music and kind of my techniques for fine-tuning these things and creating more of a cohesive structure. So anyway, with that said, let's dive back into the video. And first would be something like a unique melody, and then a unique rhythm, and then something unique about the sound design or the way that you've kind of created a sound. And generally speaking, a good concept or a good hook will have either 2 or all 3 of those in the main part of the track. So what do I mean? Let's say, for example, I was kind of just throwing stuff around here in terms of the idea, but now, you know, on going back to it and listening to it, there's a lot of stuff that isn't quite hook worthy. It's not so catchy to the ears. However, there are some parts which are catchy to the ears. And the idea for me would be to kind of identify those. I want to show you guys these 2 parts, like this part and then this part here. You know, if you go back and you watch the stream, this kind of sound that I made here with these 2 sounds that kind of work together, I almost kind of stumbled upon that. It was just, you know, I was just playing around and I was like, oh, that kind of glitchy ARP sound works really well. Whereas this kind of part here, all these sounds that are layered in, I spent, I think, a little bit more time trying to fine tune these and trying to get these sounds to work. But then just naturally, the next part just kind of fits together better to me. Let's just compare these 2. So here, you know, even though I spend more time trying to create these sounds and kind of intertwine them and get this kind of rise to sound a lot more natural, it almost as if these elements that are here don't fit as well as these ones. You know, it's a lot simpler. It's just got this kind of like da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. So, you know, there's no 2 elements playing at the same time. They kind of juggle off each other. And I think that's a very important thing about creating a sort of groovy hook, is to have multiple elements that kind of work together rather than just a bunch of layers kind of playing all these complex sounds. So here, for example, that kind of like main sound, this one here. So I would say that's kind of more of a stronger sound design, rhythmic kind of thing, or at least the interplay between these 2 layers, more of a kind of rhythmic. But there's a kind of lead synth here that I feel is not quite strong enough. So this lead sound here is not quite strong enough, I feel. And I think what I want to try to do is recreate a sound with this melody and play it off the rhythm of these 2 sounds. On a side note, I feel like these 2 sounds aren't quite a hook. It's kind of more of a B section, which I want to talk about a little bit later on in the video. So let's talk about a couple of ways of developing a sound further into something that's a little bit more, maybe sounds a little bit more polished. What I also want to do is maybe recreate, and use a new sound on this rhythm, because the sound is cool and it's in a nice frequency range, but I feel it's not quite cutting enough. So I want to maybe create a new sound with surge and use this kind of MIDI progression. Okay, so what we can actually do is, I just want to put this here so I know where it is. And I actually want to move the entire arrangement up. And then we can start recreating something at the beginning here and arrange it a lot more cohesively. But we still got all the sounds here that we created earlier. Okay, let's chop this and drag this into our track. So this is our B section. Let's pop this somewhere around 3 minutes or so. So here, like I said, I figured I just want to jump in and explain a little bit about what I was doing here, because I wasn't too explanatory while creating the video. I was basically just looking for some of the MIDIs and recreating some of those rhythmic synths. Once I had kind of played around with the sounds, I kind of identified what I wanted to do with a theme or hook with a track, and then I could kind of start to fine-tune these sounds. And I figured I wanted to use a preset that I had made in a previous video, which you can actually check out over here. It was in Surge, and it was either one of these two videos should get you close to what you're looking for there. So I ended up just playing around with some of the settings, like the filters in the actual preset, and I also turned it down 1 octave, and that's pretty much it. Then the rest was post-processing and just kind of trying to fit it into that rhythm and replace the sample that I had created during the stream. And then I put in another preset that I had created, but I used one of the other MIDIs, that melody line that I was showing you guys. And that was created with either one of these two tutorials. You could use those as a basis, and I'm sure it'll get you very close to the sound that you're looking for. So then what I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to create a variation on that lead that I created with Hive. I thought it would be really cool to have a section, like a main hook section with the running lead as it is, but then break into a B section where it's kind of juggling off some of the other elements in the track. So I believe in that section I kind of just octave shifted downwards and then just muted some of the parts, so it was stabbing this synth and that synth kind of juggling effect. I explain that now though. Okay, so what have I done here with these synths? It helps to kind of create a groove. It helps to get these synths to kind of, as you see here, like I've kind of interplayed them between each other. It goes this one, then the first one again, and then this one. And kind of at no 2 points are the synths playing together. I guess there are some points where there's overlaps. You can go in and kind of fine tune it if you want. Depends on the kind of, how you want it. I think that's working pretty well. It's kind of got this contrast between this layered section and then more of a kind of juggly section. And that's a very nice way of being able to transition between a main hook and a B section. So juggling these elements is the best way of creating groove. And on top of that, being able to do so in like the percussions, for example, if you've got like a complex groove with the synth, which I don't think we kind of have too much of going on here, you can kind of get the percussions to kind of play off the rhythm of the synths and that kind of thing. But I do have another example. I'm probably going to paste it, edit it into this video as well. So the idea of the B section is to kind of have a follow-on to your main hook, something that's kind of a little bit the same, but also a little bit different. So using the same synth, but then moving into a different progression or juggling those elements is a very powerful way of being able to do so. So in this example, I want to talk a little bit about creating more of a groove or getting multiple elements in your track to kind of groove together. I mean, there's various kind of ways you can go about this, and I guess, like I said earlier, the key to getting a good hook is just to develop the sounds in your track. Just keep going, and you will know when something is hook worthy or something is an earworm. And I guess I'm going to show you a couple of ideas for how to kind of develop the sounds that you have into more cohesive elements that kind of work together. And ways that I like to do that is to either get them to play together or to not play together. So either juggle them or get them to, for example, like have a vocal going to the rhythm of a percussion line that you've established earlier on in the track. So basically what I'm talking about, I've got this sort of congas loop with a random modulation happening on the pitch, and it's doing a really cool kind of rhythm to it that becomes quite memorable throughout the track. As you can see, I use this quite a lot in the track. But around about here, where I want to start picking up the interest in the track, I think it'd be cool to start introducing kind of vocal elements that are going to that same rhythm of the percussion. So it's already well established in your brain, the groove of that percussion line. And having something that comes in with that same kind of memorable rhythm or groove is definitely going to kind of take your point home. So this is the percussion line that I'm talking about. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to identify the kind of rhythm of this congas loop. So actually, let's just put this onto a new channel, which I'm going to mute and then chop up to kind of see a little bit easier, line it up alongside this vocal that I have here, and we can start kind of creating that rhythm. So let's just zoom into the waveform a little bit over here, and we can see exactly what's happening. So basically what I want to do here is I'm not going to play you guys the entire vocal sample because I believe it is from another YouTube video and I don't want any issues. However, if I chop it up, it probably won't be recognizable. So what I want to do is let's just unmute this, and I'm going to just drag this to the beginning syllable over here. And what we can do is let's just hold Alt and let's cut like that. And we can just randomly go and remove bits. Let's say I'm going to remove anything that looks like it's got, for example, like anything less than like this in volume. So that should be good. Let's remove that. We've got that. We can remove all of these. So the idea here is we're going to create this kind of like vocal choppiness. We can even rearrange these to make it even less kind of audible in terms of what it's saying, because we're kind of going for a more vocal, rhythmic kind of groove. So I'm just going to arrange all of these closer here to the beginning. And for example, stuff like here, where you can see the sample starts like halfway through, we can hold Control-Alt and then just drag it along so that we're kind of starting the sample on the hit, if that makes sense. So just to give you guys a reference of what's happening here, I'm just going to drag these. I'll probably finish processing the rest of this a little bit later. If I'm even going to go that far, I might have enough content to work with here. So let's just move that along. And let's just move all of these into a closer pattern here. And let's run through all of these and just shift them so that they start at the beginning of the sample. Let's go here. So now I'm just going to randomly rearrange them. Let's actually take like every second one and move it along outside and then move them inwards, just so that there's like no way that there's going to be like a repetition there, if that makes sense, of the original content. Okay, let's just loop this section here. Okay, there's a little bit of click on the beginning of each of them, so I'm just going to select them all and then click fade in one over here. So it's one sample of fade in on each. So I guess here the trick is to kind of identify where the hit points are in the loop or the sort of sound that you're recreating. There are various ways of kind of doing this automatically with Cubase, although, you know, with dance music, a lot of the stuff is already quantized. So, you know, chopping it to the 16th and muting certain elements is, I think, a lot more of an easier kind of way of getting a tighter sound that's on the grid. That being said, there are ways of, you know, extracting hit points from a audio sample. I'm going to cover that in a future Cubase tutorial. I haven't actually posted it yet, so I can't give you guys the link for that yet, but do stay tuned. I guess here, what I was doing was just going through, you know, as I said, lined up these samples on the 16th and just kind of muting them and auditioning to see where they kind of slot into that kind of percussion rhythm that I had already established in the track. So with these vocal things, it helps to use this very audio. I'm going to do a tutorial on this, but what I want to do is just highlight all of them and then quantize so that they're closer to the pitch, and then straighten curve as well. So to liven up the kind of vocal loop sample thing that I had created, I used Soundtoys Crystallizer, which is a really cool kind of granular echo, granular reverb processor type thing. I also used Arturia's Rev Intensity as a reverb to, give the sound some kind of space, some kind of ambient type of effect as well. And then Filter Freak to kind of bring that sound in over the whole project. And as it was starting to take shape, I kind of used the sound as the kind of movement or progression throughout the entire project. So I tried to do these very long filter sweeps that, really kind of build that momentum of the track slowly, and use that interplay between that kind of percussive rhythm as well as the vocal rhythm to kind of create these, that movement, so you first establish the percussion rhythm, and then slowly that kind of vocal on the same kind of rhythm starts to come in. Slowly the kind of sound morphs into that kind of vocal thing over the entirety of the project, and back again, and vice versa. So one thing, when layering the vocal sound alongside that kind of percussive rhythm, I noticed that the vocal sound was kind of taking over. So you didn't really get the power of that percussive sound as much. So I felt using dynamics processing and Kilohearts dynamics plugin, as well as the Kilohearts transient shaper first off, the dynamics was basically shaving off the tails of those sounds, because I think the vocals kind of replaced that tail of the sound, and then the transient shaper to kind of boost the attack of the sound. So that should explain that. Anyway, that's sounding pretty damn awesome. I really like that. That's definitely going to stay in the track, and I think that's hook worthy. So then the trick is to kind of play off the idea that those sounds are the same rhythm. For more energy, you could have a section where they're playing together. For example, here where I'm building up to this kind of like main drop, it's got this kind of like filter inwards and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, hopefully that gives you an idea of what I'm talking about with that type of stuff. Okay, so let's start creating a more cohesive structure out of these loops that we've created. So firstly, I want to discuss the idea of a DJ-friendly track. So essentially what that means is giving the DJ or the person who's going to perform your song, you or the DJ or whoever, giving them time to mix the track in. And I guess this is a kind of a concept that's become a norm with dance music, and has kind of created the style of that kind of slow build-up of track. But I mean, essentially, as tempting as it can be to, give away the entirety of your track right at the beginning, to give away all your secrets right at the beginning, I find that, the further you kind of stretch it along, the more you kind of, the more you elongate your arrangement, when it finally does hit that peak, it feels a lot more satisfying to the listener. So I wanted to kind of discuss a couple of concepts, but also just more of a kind of practical example as I go through arranging this track and show you guys a couple of things to look out for. One thing that I've kind of noticed is often what happens is, the beginning of the track will be this massive build-up, and as the kind of kick and bass comes in, it's already a full track. It's got the kick and bass and percussions and everything in there already. So as, say for example, if I'm going to DJ the track, there's almost no time for me to mix the track in. I'd be mixing the main section over the main section. And say for example, there's a part with like a drop, with like a drum roll or something like that you kind of want to be heard when the DJ mixes the track, then it definitely helps to have a long segment of kind of just raw kick and bass in the beginning of the track. So what I want to do here is, let's just say, for example, I'm going to use these blocks here on this blank audio channel to kind of sketch out an idea for a structure before I kind of start pasting in all the blocks. So here I've kind of got a drum roll. This is just a placeholder. I'm definitely going to change it because it's just a loop that I found in a sample pack. But the idea here, what I want to do is I kind of want to have a breakdown here with some pads and that kind of thing, and maybe a filtered out kick and bass. Before a riser, I've actually got a bunch of riser effects and stuff that I've already made in this track. I can actually just pull those over here. So I kind of want to have this like breakdown section here before this massive riser and a drop, and then this kind of drum roll. So let's start sketching this out here. Before that, I obviously want, some kick and bass and stuff. So the idea here is, let's just say these whole, let's just make this a more noticeable color. Okay, like green can be the breakdown. We can make an intro here as well. And then let's say yellow, this will be like just kick and bass over here. And then we slowly bring in some percussions over here. So this would give the DJ, some variety in terms of how they want to mix the track. Do they want to mix it into just kick and bass, or do they want some of the interest from the track to be in the mix? I guess nowadays it's not as important because of stuff like Tractor and the ability to loop small segments, and how people are performing DJ sets, in Ableton and all sorts of stuff nowadays. So I guess it doesn't really matter all that much, but the kind of sound or the structure has kind of become part of dance music, so to speak. So, now that I'm kind of looking at this, you'll notice here that I've kind of got these longer segments over here. So this is not as important, but one thing that I've kind of picked up is your bar length kind of governs the momentum at which the track is picking up. So if you have these long drawn out bar lengths, you kind of get a much slower momentum. But then as the track picks up, to kind of have shorter bar lengths kind of helps to obviously, increase the momentum of the track. And then obviously, like in your final build-up, you can have breaks. Obviously not everybody wants to do that. It's a more of a full-on thing. But then you can have breaks like every 8 bars or so. Anyway, as I'm kind of sketching this out, I'm noticing here that there isn't much space here for an intro. So what I want to do is I actually just want to move all this stuff along a little bit. And you'll notice that here around 3 minutes or so is kind of where the main, or our kind of main hook that we've created comes in. And you'll notice that is quite a thing with psytrance, is around about 3 minutes. I mean, obviously it's not a rule, but around about 3 minutes is where you'll generally find like the main peak or the main interest of the track. Again, like I said, it's not a rule. There's, top artists who don't do that, who start the track off just, as they go. But I guess having a thoughtful structure in mind when you're creating these things definitely helps, especially if you're a beginner. Definitely helps to create something that sounds more thoughtful in the long term. So anyway, I've sketched out some of these ideas here. So I guess now the idea is to kind of work backwards and to flesh out the segments here. So I've got a couple of sound effects and all sorts of stuff that I can start to, slip in here. I've actually got a reverbed kick. Let's put that over here. That can be to kind of signify the beginning of the breakdown. And then we can maybe start bringing in one of these synths here. I actually took out, but we can actually move it here to this part. See how that works. So here, this would be our kind of DJ-friendly part, or at least part one of our DJ-friendly sequence. So here, you want to kind of have as little as possible, but still give the DJ or the listener as much information about what's coming as possible without giving away too much. So one technique to pull this off effectively is to kind of hint at the prize, give them a kind of slight hint as to some of the sounds which are coming in later on. So what I like to do here is, let's say, for example, I actually want to go ahead and bounce some of the things that I've got here. They're not quite bounced yet. So I've got my main elements, and I've bounced most of them out now, as you can see. So the idea here is to kind of introduce them, or slight bits of them, one by one. So it could either be just like a single stab on the MIDI controller every now and then, or you could do like a rhythmic thing between a couple of the layers, or you could just copy one of them, something like this, and then just cut out that part of it. Let's just do this. And then put it in an event again, just so it's nice and clean. Okay, that's cool. We're not giving away too much, but we're giving the listener the kind of tone and the vibe of the track. We're giving them some of the sounds, some of the sound effects, and the rhythm for the DJ to obviously mix into. So then we can progress this slightly by starting to introduce some of the percussions and stuff like that before we strip it away into a breakdown and then the main parts. So let's just copy this over like this. And what I like to do here is just copy the main percussions group and then fill up the space and then start to remove some of the elements, audition which ones sound. So actually, let's just quickly do this. So audition with it on and off. So obviously the main open hi-hat is going to come out, but before actually just removing it, I want to just experiment with which parts sound best, if that makes sense. Sometimes we want the snare, sometimes we don't. I guess it depends on what kind of speed and momentum you're wanting to build up. You might even want to break the bar length here. Say, for example, don't bring in the snares yet. Start to slowly filter in the percussions and stuff, but we can play with a couple of variations here. So another thing that's quite important is to, bring the energy down before building it up. A lot of the time, what I'll notice with beginners is they will kind of peak the energy of the track, and from there till the end of the track, it will kind of just, more layers and more layers just keep adding on. But I find like the sort of amount of energy in an arrangement of a track is relative. If you've got a kind of section like this, which is kind of sparse, and then a section like this, which is very energetic, the arrangement is gonna feel like it's got a lot more dynamics. What I like to do is once I've peaked it, is I like to break it down a little bit. Still maintaining the rhythms and that kind of thing, but maybe remove the open hi-hats and keep a couple of those synths and stuff going, and maybe start to break those down a bit before reintroducing another B section or something like that. So here we've got this kind of main synth that plays out here, and it kind of carries on into this part. So here what we can do, for example, is start to filter this out. And that's another one, is don't be afraid to kind of break the grid. A lot of the time, tracks are very linear, and they're very kind of, every 4 bars another sound comes in, and then another sound comes in, and another sound comes in. And you've got 100 layers of every 4 bars something changes. And, there's not much dynamics in that sort of arrangement. So, here, for example, what we're doing is we kind of have this energetic part here, and then we're kind of slowing it down, and we're kind of tricking the brain to thinking that there's going to be something, exciting happening exactly here, because there's this kind of breakdown, slow build down, and then a quick build up here, and then we're kind of just stopping it for these 2 beats. So I mentioned a nice way of kind of introducing parts well before they actually come in, or giving the listener a kind of hint at what's to come, is to use parts of your kind of main section, like parts of your concept or your hook, much earlier in the track. So I kind of mentioned that earlier on in the video, hint at the prize. And basically, I would say the easiest way of doing that is to, let's say I'm going to create a blank section here. So I just want to move just a loop of kick and bass just over here like this. And then what I want to do is I just want to put in, the loop that I have created of a couple of my main leads throughout each of these parts here. And what we can do is this one as well. There's still full sections, but what I want to do is I want to show you guys the power of kind of, chopping little bits out of these and processing them and creating all sorts of, let's say create pads and stuff out of sounds that are already existing in the project to, introduce the tone well before it actually, before that sound actually comes in. With most of these main elements, one thing that I noticed, I was actually dragging the audio over, but I realized that there's like echoes and stuff on the samples, but what I actually want to show you is, we're going to need to get these samples pretty raw. So I'm going to actually just drag in these MIDIs of each of these that we have. I guess this one is fine. Surge one we'll just grab like this. So what do I mean by that? Here, for example, this surge sound. So that's already got like delays and stuff on the actual sound itself. But what I want to do quickly is let's just take this filter and this delay off, and just to make things a little bit easier for processing and stuff, let's just make the volume full on the channel. And what I want to do is let's just render out one hit of this sound. I actually do want to put that filter on. It was kind of part of the sound design characteristics of the sound, I think. So here, let's just render out that one hit. Let's go render in place. So I want to create a new folder, in fact. Let's just go new folder. And we can start putting these new sounds that we've created now into this folder. Boom. Let's just put this at the top here. And we can give it a color. Let's check out this serum lead here that we have. So I kind of like the twisty motion that sound has. And I think that could fare well with, processing and stretching and reversing and all sorts of stuff. So I want to render this out as it is. I don't believe there's any delays and stuff on there. So then let's just cut this, move this into this folder here. Let's check out this lead that we have here. I want to take off and let's render just that piece. And last but not least, let's do some hits of this Hive lead. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. Now let's just clean up this part here. Maybe mute these MIDI instruments that we're not going to use anymore. I think we've got enough content out of those. So now the idea is to, create like a full section, but only use these samples as the source material. So what do I mean by this? Let's create pads, atmospheres. Basically, let's just try to create as many different variations on sounds as we can for these different types of sounds. So I did actually do a tutorial on different techniques for sound design, my top 5 tips for sound design. So that should help you to achieve some various different, results with these. But essentially, what I'm thinking here is this kind of ARP that I slowed down and turned down an octave. Maybe we can try to turn this into an atmosphere somehow. So here I've added snap heap with a couple of different reverb parameters. It's actually a pretty simple thing. I did post this preset to my Patreon for my $5 supporters. If you want to know what that's all about, check out the link that's going to be at the video on the screen at the end of the video. Then I also put on Crystallizer, which I did explain earlier. It's kind of like a granular processor. And then LFO tool to kind of give it a pumping effect. So I'm turning this kind of ARP into more of a kind of atmosphere. Let's start playing with some of these other sounds. What we can do is maybe try create like a dub delay effect on this guy, like an endless delay. Sometimes when using these kind of like reverbs with max mix, or like, you know, with like very big reverbs in that kind of like atmosphere type of effect, it can help to shift the samples along a little bit just to, you know, preempt where they play so that the reverb doesn't sound too late, if that makes sense. It's kind of got a late feeling here. Okay, so let's render out this little delay stab that we created. And what I like to do is I actually like to render out a couple of variations of this. So we can do one at like double time. And I want to show you guys a neat little trick as well. So let's say, for example, this might be a little bit confusing at first, but let's bounce this sample. So this is still the dry sample, you know, without the delay. Let's mute the delayed rendered out version. Let's reverse the sample, right? So now what's happening is it's going to be the reverse of itself, and then it's going to echo out. But let's create a faster echo. So let's do something like 1/16 dotted. Let's just hear how this sounds. So now a really cool trick is to actually render this out and then reverse it again. So you kind of have this, it kind of sounds like the sound is kind of glitching inwards. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's probably going to be easier to just listen to the After Effect rather than me trying to explain it, but this is what I mean. And then, like I said, we can reverse this, but what I want to do is I actually want to cut off the beginning tail so we know exactly where the sound is starting. And let's just go process. Let's actually make it a bit smaller because it's a little bit long. Bounce and then reverse. We could always move these two and then check the effect of this. So that's a very cool, you know, thing to use in these kind of like transitions here. Let's say, for example, have this delay out starting in this little break here. so that later, when the sound actually comes in, it's almost like it's recognizable because you kind of heard it delaying out and being parts of these kind of like ambienty things. So of course it's not perfect. I'd put filters and, I'd render these parts out, bring them in and out again to create that movement over time. But this is just a bunch of practical examples of how you guys can do it. So I'm going to skip creating a breakdown and build up, and I'm going to kind of just jump to the, final segment of the track, and a really cool way of kind of like rounding it all off and creating something, cohesive at the same time. Just to quickly start things off, I just want to move our percussions and our bass over here, and quickly just explain something for you guys. So here, our colored blocks at the bottom here, these represent, our A section and our B section. It's really cool to introduce, nearing the end of the track, introduce a final something different, but using the elements that you've established in the A section and the B section. Here, I think the kind of best way to, round this off is to flip the way that, your sounds are playing off. So let's say, for example, we've got this sound, which is more of a rhythmic sound. This one over here. But then we've got that like lead over here. In fact, this lead over here. So a really cool technique is to, flip these sounds. Maybe have the one that's doing the rhythmic thing swap over and do a melodic thing, and vice versa. And to play with, how you've established these sounds as the different parts of your song. So what I want to do is I just want to move this melody that we've created for this Hive channel and drop it onto this Serum channel, which is that rhythmic thing. And let's just pop this over here. So it's probably not going to sound good straight off the bat. We might need some velocity adjustments and some other processing and some filter movements and stuff. But the idea still kind of remains that it's, it's a trick that I use quite often. So I kind of want to change the rhythm here. The melody, it's great, but it's too, every 1/16th note there's something playing. So I kind of want to just mute some of these notes to create a bit of interest there. But then what we can do is we can fill those notes in with hits from the Hive synth, which was established as the melodic synth, if that makes sense. So we're kind of flipping the script of our arrangement, but at the same time keeping things, within the boundaries of what the ear already, what we've already heard and what is already established in our entire track. I actually want to duplicate this Hive track that we created, and I can just turn off these effects, and then I will just isolate one of these hits, and then we can just loop that. Okay, it is a little bit sudden, so I'd probably do like a build up to this kind of like final energetic part, but you guys get the picture. You know, how you can remember this kind of technique or the sequence is it's A, B, A, B, C, where C equals A plus B. So that's the easiest way to remember it, and it's actually a very, very powerful technique, and it kind of rounds off the whole song with this kind of like final energetic piece, using most of the stuff that you've got already in the track. Sheesh, that was a long one. Hopefully you guys are still here with me. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you do like this more long form type of content, also let me know in the comments. Yeah, hopefully that gave you guys a ton of stuff to help fine tune your tracks and make the most of those loops and hundreds of unfinished projects that you have laying around. Oh yeah, one last thing. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more, and consider supporting me on Patreon if you want tons of content extra, like the sounds that I make in these videos and stuff. Yeah. See you guys next time.